friends, it's Christy, and I'm so excited to be back with you all at My Favorite Things. Today I'm going to be making a card using the new Polar Penguins stamp set. I just love these little guys. So I have stamped out my images in black licorice hybrid ink on some Neenah Solar White cardstock, and I'm going to start by coloring my images with Copic markers. I'm going to be doing something a little bit different with these penguins today. Instead of coloring them the typical black, I'm going to color them dark blue. So I'm using B34, B37, and B39. The B39 is going to be my darkest shade, so I'm going to fill in the area by his feet and also on the sides of his head, and then I'm going to pull up towards the top of his head with that B37 and fill in with the B34, and I'll color all the rest of the penguins the same. Then for their bellies, I'm going to add just a little bit of shading with the R000. And then I'll grab my colorless blender and just blend that out and soften it up. I'm going to color in their rosy cheeks with the R20 and then use the R22 for their beaks. I'll use both of those shades on their feet, and I know that's a little funny, but I was kind of restricting myself to a particular color palette that I really wanted to use, although I did decide that it needed to be a little more peach toned, so I just went over that with the YR02. Then I'm going to grab the YR01 and YR00 and begin to color in some of the stripes of their sweaters. I'm also going to do the stripes on the little penguin on the far right's hat, and then I'll color in some of the light bulbs and accessories with these shades as well. Next up is going to be some red tones, but I want it to be more in the pink family. So I'm using R20, R22, and R24, and I did have a little oops here. I had just refilled that R24 marker the night before, and I must have overfilled it just a bit, so it leaked out, but I didn't panic. I took the other end of the cap off, so both caps are now off, and I'm going to let that area dry up at the top, and I'm just going to continue coloring. I did scribble off a little bit of ink just to help it not to drip so much anymore, and then I'm just going to continue with my coloring. So I'm going to blend out that R24 with the R22. That's going to be my mid-tone, and then I'll bring in the R20 for the highlight. Once again, I will color in some more sections of the other little penguin's hat and sweaters and more light bulbs and all the ribbons on the gifts as well in those red shades. The next combo that I wanted was a super pale pink, so I'm using R000, R00, and R01. And I'm just going to do a few more little stripes, and I'll also do the white sections of the candy cane and the edges of the sweater, the little cuffs, and also the hat band. And I did the pom-pom on the penguin on the right's hat as well. My next color combination is BG10, BG11, and BG13. So I'm going to color in the little gift in the penguin on the left's hand with all three shades. And then I'm just going to do the lighter two shades on the igloo. I'm scribbling on that BG11 in kind of a backwards L shape to give some color in the bottom right corner of each of those ice blocks. And then I'll blend up with the BG10 and let that fade off into white. Once my coloring is finished, I'm going to take a white gel pen and just trace around the black outline of that section of the little hat. I don't need to eliminate the red completely that came outside the lines. I just need to do enough that the white trim of the die cut image will still be white. So it will actually be a little bit pink because that color was really strong, and I'll show you guys that as I pop it out of the die here. But once that's dry, I can go over that a second time, and that will take it down to white, and you'll never even know. Moving on to my background, I'm going to use some dried marigold and spun sugar distress ink blended onto a piece of Bristol smooth surface cardstock, and I'm blending that on pretty messily because I wanted it to be a nice heavy coat. So I'm using that dried marigold from about the midsection up, and then I'll come in at the top with the spun sugar. Then to darken up the edges, I'm going to bring in some abandoned coral, and this time I'm going to use very light pressure because this color does go on pretty strongly, and I wanted to just create that halo effect on the outside edge, so I'm using barely any pressure as I apply this. I'm going to smoosh the original two shades down on my work surface and water those down a bit and do a little splatter effect just to add some interest to the background. And then I'm going to grab some Copic opaque white and do the same to create some snowfall. So I'll just tap that against my finger to get some nice different size drops and put it on pretty heavily since this is a snowy scene, and then set this panel aside to dry. Then I took the snowy hillside Die-namics and cut out 3 more pieces of Bristol, and I'm going to use some tumbled glass and one of the new stencils. These are the winter stencil strips, and there are 4 included in this packet, and I'm going to just sponge some ink onto the background and give it some texture by pouncing my foam tool through the stencil and just doing it kind of sporadically and creating some different designs. I don't want it to be like a complete image. I just want it to be kind of scattered here and there. I'll also take the 3 little trees that are included in the Snowy Hillside die set, and then I'm going to sponge on some evergreen bough distress ink, and I did that really randomly. I wanted it to be really kind of texturized. And then I'm going to move on to stamping out my sentiment. I'm using a piece of blue raspberry cardstock, and I'm going to heat emboss my sentiment. So I first treated that with a powder tool, and then I'm going to stamp in Versamark ink. I'm going to ink that up twice and just push it down lightly so that I get a nice impression. It's not kind of too squished out. And then I'm going to coat that with some white embossing powder. And then I'll bring my heat tool to that. I'm going to let that heat up for just a few seconds first, and then I'll come at it from the back and then turn it towards the front and just heat that until it's all nice and bright white and shiny. While I have my MISTI out, I'm also going to stamp on the inside of my card. I'm using a Coral Crush card base. I'm stamping out another little penguin and a sentiment from Reindeer Games, which was released last month. And I'm going to stamp that down a couple times to make sure the impression is nice and bold, and it reads, "Have a Magical Christmas." Now that I have all of my elements together, I can start the assembly. I'm using a piece of pattern paper from the Sweet Celebration 6x6, and I trimmed that and the focal panel down with the A2 Stitch Rectangle Stacks Set 2. I'm going to adhere my pattern paper down first with some liquid glue, and then I've added some foam tape to the back of my focal panel, so I'll just line that up and make sure it's centered and then press it down into place. I also trimmed down my little snowy hills with that A2 Stitch Rectangle Stacks Set 2 die so that the stitching detail on the outside edges would match. So I'm just going to build those into place, starting with the lowest panel first and then tucking in the other 2. And now comes the fun part. I get to kind of fill in my scene with all my little images and make sure everything is going right where I want it. I'm adhering everything nice and flat to the card with more liquid glue. Since we already have that one level of foam tape underneath the focal panel, I didn't want to add anything additional, so this card would be good for mailing. I like to be very conscious of not adding too much dimension when there's going to be a lot of cards going in the mail, and with the price of stamps these days, it's just good to be able to fit it in a regular envelope if you can. So that one layer of foam tape is going to be just enough to be able to fit in a regular envelope. So I'm going to finish off my scene with my last few images. I really wanted this third penguin to be standing on the top of the igloo holding his mistletoe. I just thought that would be super cute. I also trimmed down my sentiment with one of the essential slanted sentiment strips. So I'm going to just adhere that over on the far right. And then as a final embellishment, I grabbed my favorite crystal stickles and I added some glitter to all of the light bulbs and to the ribbons on the gifts and the pom-pom and the earmuffs and the white parts of the Santa hat and the buckle. And I dotted a little bit into the sky as well, just for some sparkly snowflakes. And that is going to complete my card for today. I'll lift that up so you can see how it catches the light and give you another peek at the inside. So I hope you guys have enjoyed the November edition of Christy Gets Crafty with My Favorite Things. I had a blast creating this card for you guys. If you did like it, be sure to hit that thumbs up button and you can leave me a comment down below. I love interacting with you guys down there. Make sure that you're subscribed to My Favorite Things for more inspiring videos just like these here on screen. Bye-bye.